So, hello and welcome back to the class. Now, today we're going to be talking about the bare bones of what empathy is so that we can begin to understand how it works. And oh, there we go. Now we're live. and how some things in you, some patterns may have developed that are very particular to empaths, very particular to people who are sensitive in that nature, so we can begin understanding, how to create better, more healthy boundaries so that we can begin to understand where and how we need to take care of ourselves in this. All right, so like we're talking. We're talking about boundaries, but we're talking more specifically today about boundaries from an empathic and an intuitive perspective. So, one that's really taking in the energetic patterning and kind of like event sequence that happens around like just general empathy. So, we're not going to delve too deeply into anything specific today. This is a more reflective thing, and there are going to be some. Let me look at my notes here. There's going to just be some journaling exercises after this. So, I don't want you to get too bogged down in really visualizing everything. It's enough to really just kind of skim this over and take a like brief inventory of, how you got to here in this present incarnation so that you can begin to see how deeply and interwoven your abilities and your perceptions have been uh, throughout your life and throughout who you are and who you think you are, at least up until this point, right? Because we're going to begin to flip the script on some of this. But we have to start at, a base level for everybody. So that is what this video is for. So this is something that you have most likely really have been going through, living with since you came into this world. It is just part of your hard wiring, whether you realized it back then or not, or even if maybe you realized it really early on or had some clue about it really early on, but were then taught to dismiss it as something that isn't true or isn't real or isn't what normal people experience. So as a child, and this can go a couple different ways depending on how we learn to cope with these things, right? But some of the most common childhood experiences of people who are intuitive empaths are they are told they are too sensitive, that maybe they are crybabies, maybe they're tattletales, or maybe if you've had enough experience with people not understanding you from an incredibly young age, you might even have developed even at a very young age the pattern of abandoning people and abandoning friends, so that you can really stand on your own, so that you're not always in the face of rejection. You tend to be very introverted. And maybe it was just introverted around particular people or certain social situations, but it's probably something your parents noted and maybe called you out on. And part of this introversion, or even what sends you into that kind of withdrawal state, could just be criticism, people making generalized or perhaps even unthoughtful comments about you. Things, that will kind of trigger that whole am I being rejected, or are people putting their own energies onto me kind of perception for the empath. Now, I'm going to say this next one in a kind of controversial way to begin with, just because I want to call out the pattern now so that we see it. But even as a child, you have felt that you were superior to others, but in a very particular way. And it really depends on what kind of values you were raised in, what you picked up on that early in life. Like sometimes it's intelligence, sometimes it's hardworkingness, sometimes oh, there are lots of common ways we invalidate others' experiences, aren't there? But intuitive empaths really have this sense of they know what's better for everybody, or they know what the rules should be. They know how people should be acting, which makes them really good peacekeepers, really good at being other people's consciouses, no, conscious, like Jiminy Cricket, your conscience, their conscience in this particular instance. Um, and you may have even resonated with more mature people than yourself. So, teenagers when you were really young, adults, people who weren't necessarily all caught up in the silly little games and comparisons that little kids like to make, and even preteens like to make when they get. I mean, kids can be mean, period, because they're always looking at the external world and trying to fit themselves into it. That's just their growth stage. But when you're an intuitive empath and from a very young age you already know better and then can therefore dismiss your peer group, it creates this sense of not belonging from a very young age. And sometimes we're able to overcome that by feeling into our self worth because we do know better in some way. And other times it just completely tanks our self esteem. And we don't get that boost we feel from superiority. Sometimes, it can go both ways. It depends on, your family dynamics really at that rate, and your soul pattern of how you were sent to develop in this world. A lot of intuitive empaths, because they resonate with people who are more mature, they also want, at least, to trust authority figures more than your average kid. They are going to be seen as, like the teacher's pet or a mama's boy, or something along those lines, where you are somehow more favored or maybe even seen as brown nosing up to an authority figure, because your people pleasing has already kicked in, because you already sense that you resonate with somebody who is more mature, who does know better, um, and you do feel already, or you did feel at that point already, that you don't belong with your peer group. You belong in a different age set, a different energy set, a different value set. It really depends on, again, your personal life. Um, but that also makes you more susceptible to what authority figures say about you. And who we look up to as kids, even though, we saw some kind of resonance there at that point, they're still people. And there's still people who might have had some baggage. And sometimes that baggage can hurt us more because we were looking for a sense of belonging and identification with them than we were from, kids our own age. And, that can mess with a lot of people. That can mess, abusive authority is such a common thing with intuitive empaths. I almost fail to talk about it because for me, it's such a taken for granted thing. Because kids are little, and even though we think we know better and we think we know what's going on when we were little, um, we still weren't fully developed as people. Our brains were still developing, our synapses were still developing. We didn't fully grasp the whole situation anyway. And then perhaps we also had some kind of then traumatic loss of trust or abuse of trust from an authority figure. But over the years, things compile, we go through life, and all this leads to adults, intuitive empaths, who have an underdeveloped sense of self, their core self. They have a hard time identifying what their own opinions are and sticking to those opinions. They seem to wiffle waffle between how they feel and what they think, depending on who they're with or who they're giving priority to in that moment or in that epoch of their life. Your boundaries are not fully developed. You probably don't even know how to hold boundaries in certain situations, or you hold your boundaries too hard and too fast in other situations because you're trying to like overcompensate for this innate lack of self trust. And there's a lot of feminine conditioning that does go into this because women are taught to prioritize caring for others more than themselves or over themselves by the general Western overculture that we have a lot of issues. We have a lot of issues holding boundaries, a lot of issues allowing others to learn their own lessons, a lot of issues in receiving and accepting help, a lot of issues that overlap with a lot of other, you know, personal boundary issues. So you don't have to be an intuitive empath to experience some of this. But for people who do happen to be intuitive empaths as well as women in this world, it's like the problem is compounded. It takes on a whole other level, a whole other, inner beastie demon with fangs in the back of your mind all the time. And of course, you don't feel you're worthy. You don't have much self esteem. What's one more chore before going to sleep and getting a full 8 hours rest when I don't have to do it tomorrow or I can just get it off my plate for this week? And a lot of times we rely on a blame game control mechanism when we become defensive or we start feeling resentful, because resentful is a big pattern with empaths and with people who have an overly developed sense of caretaking, like a lot of women and intuitive empaths too. So the blame game defense mechanism is a way of using guilt to control people, to tell people how they should be acting in order to help us bring our dreams into fruition. I mean, it is a well-intentioned thing at the very heart of it. We are coming in a way from our innocence and our authenticity in what we see as a potential for what could be in others and for the relationship or the situation. But because we have so many issues belonging, a lot of this comes from overcompensation. And we think that we're going to get the perfect soulmate relationship by helping our mates, by helping our spouses, and by helping them to death. So we're going to delve more into that so we can see that with more clarity for your particular situation. Because there are healthy ways to create change and healthy ways to hold boundaries for ourselves and our relationships and our time and our energy that don't have to rely on the blame, I'm going to control you and manipulate you into thinking the way I think kind of game. Now, one of the other things that, and we did kind of touch on this already, because of this underdeveloped sense of self or even your core energetic self, we take on, or it's very easy for us to mirror what we see in others, mirror their primary emotion in that moment and feed it back to them, mirror their depression or their sadness in some weird ass attempt to figure out what their problem is and help them fix it, or to try and heal it within us, like as if somehow that's gonna heal them. Like, but we see it's like monkey see, monkey do, I see you feeling some way, I perceive it, I internalize it, but 9 times out of 10, the other monkey isn't going to do back. So it is a particularly one sided kind of mechanism that we're developing, that we're working with. And it's good once you learn what it is, on what level you need to take it, and how to hold some boundaries with your own practice for mirroring. And a lot of, because of this whole miasma, a lot of empaths also then experience a lot of social anxiety. And that can really just stem or be triggered by energetic or emotional overwhelm, like crowds, parties, things where people are in a generally high vibe state. It can bring on a lot of anxiety in an empathic intuitive who doesn't know how to process all of that input coming in and know what to do with it. And the whole no one ever gets me, no one ever understands me, I don't belong, and what no one sees what I see in the world, and then therefore they dismiss it because they don't understand this level of reality. I want to say up front here that empathic intuitives, intuitive, intuitive empaths see the world in a completely different way than other people. They really do. And because we're born like this, because we're hardwired like this, we take it for granted that anyone can even begin to see the things that we see in others, that we see in the potential for things to work, what it could be. This is our gift, and for the most part, it's, very taken for granted, or it's taken as very literal. I see it, so it's going to happen. With then dismissing all of the work that the other person might need to do in order to get it done, because of course then we slip into uber caretaking mode and say, well, we're going to help you through it, and we're going to do everything we can possibly do in order to make this happen for you, which is totally overreaching and out of your own authentic boundaries. Yes, it's in your authentic feels because you probably care for that person, but it's out of the scope of what can be done for any other human being out there who isn't you, yourself, and you, and your own little sphere bubble of reality. This is trying to push way out of there. I'm not saying it won't ever get results, but it usually creates a very messy situation, a very emotionally involved situation, a very drama filled situation. And it really just does require a boundary reset within you, which is why we're here. So we're looking at these patterns and we're seeing how it affects our lives and how we've grown up with these patterns, for better or for worse, from trauma or just misunderstanding from being a child looking at the world. And let me tell you, I don't think parents until like Generation X or later in time really understood that empaths, empathic intuitives, that sensitive children do need to be raised in a different way. They do need to be told very different things about the world, about how they work. Oh, hello, cat. Um, than people who aren't highly empathic or highly sensitive. So we can play the blame game all we want with our parents and previous generations, but we also have to come at it from this bare bones fact of they probably didn't know any better. And they were probably suffering from their own insecurities about being a parent and having to be responsible for everything. And because there are no rule books, and there never were, and there probably never will be, because we're so individual. But that doesn't exactly lead to, parents feeling confident in how to raise their kids or how to do discipline or how to, get them out of their withdrawn state if they're feeling hurt. So part of this is it is what it is. And yes, we're here to change things and we are here to clear up a lot of that generational stuff. But we also have to be looking forward with it a little bit more than backward. Backward in understanding how the pattern worked, but forward in saying, how else could it be? And how can we get other people on board? And a lot of it's probably going to be through education, to be very honest, and it's not necessarily going to be about one-to-one work. Um, but this is the world we live in, and this is the reason we're here, to hold those potentials open for other people, but to do it from a healthy way, where we're respecting ourselves and we're respecting the energy bubbles of others and we're respecting both of our free wills respectively. Lots of perspectives. But it's the easiest way to be able to take on your mission, to be able to come from a deeper place with your abilities than just trying to, throw your energy out there and hope it sticks. Or, trying to rule keep everybody or peace keep everybody or trying to do everybody else's work for them. Because those old patterns are not going to get you where you need to go as you awaken further. Now, let's get into some of the nuts and bolts about how this is working within you. Because you're taking it for granted how it's working, what it even is, what your boundaries are, what boundaries are actually yours. Like, so much of it is just so entangled in how you experience life so far that we have to begin dismantling this a little bit piece by piece, right? And that's what the rest of these videos are kind of going to be about, giving you a sense of how you dealt with that situation and how the energy flowed in that situation so that you can now learn from it a little bit better. All right. So, like every other intuitive, you are able to tune into a certain energy a little bit better than other energies. Your energy your that you are particularly honed in on are emotions. Now, for you, it totally depends on which psychic senses are most dominant in you. It doesn't always have to be the heart. It doesn't always have to be the feeling center first. And as you begin to think about your very personal experience of your empathy and how this has worked out for you in the past, you may even begin to notice that other senses were actually engaged first. But maybe like it happened so fast, it was easy to take for granted, it was easy to dismiss. So you could have to just see somebody in order for you to start receiving their emotional input, hearing their voice, and sometimes even just getting ready to hear somebody, like in that breath of space, even before they say anything. Sometimes it's like you heard exactly what they were feeling. Sometimes it does come claircognitively or clairsentiently, where it's just a knowing or some kind of gut feeling. But a lot of times, and what bothers empaths the most, is we miss all the first signals, and it goes straight to our emotions. And especially when you're just going out and living life and you're not particularly in your awareness of being an empath, it will just feel like random emotions hit you, ran you over, dragged you across the road, left you in the gutter, and like it'll be without context. And you'll find yourself like fishing around going like, why am I feeling that? Like I wasn't feeling that way earlier this afternoon. What the hell happened? Why did I suddenly start feeling that particular way? And if you aren't in your awareness, you're probably going to fish around in your brain and come up with a very personal reason as to why you felt it. Because your brain likes to explain stuff. And it's been trained up until fairly recently, I'm going to dare say here, to really look for that emotion as, something about you personally, what you did, what somebody said to you. But a lot of times, a lot of times, the emotions you're feeling aren't you. Because you are unconsciously, like you're not even aware you're doing it, mirroring something or someone else. Like that reality just dawns on you and it begins to bloom in your mind and your head, but you're not, like, you don't even know where you picked it up from in the beginning. Or you might guess because maybe this is the fifth time you've had a conversation with somebody and this is the fifth time you left feeling that same way. Or you just feel completely drained. So you're beginning to realize it's something that they're doing that just puts you out of alignment, just sucks your energy, just makes you feel like crap. But you don't know what. You don't necessarily know what. This is all because you've taken on some emotion and now you're trying to process an external emotion in you. And let me tell you, some people say they can metabolize it, and maybe after you've gained some experience with recognizing, like, oh, I just took on something. Let me see what this is about. Like maybe that, like after a while, maybe you could metabolize some of it. But even to this day, and I'm in like my mid 40s at this point, um, I really find it just the best way to even begin to deal with it is to just recognize that it's not mine and kind of put it on a shelf from there because it's not mine. It may have triggered some old stuff in me, so then I can deal with my own stuff once I've compartmentalized, once I've released the root of what I took on. So we'll get into that. That's what this course is kind of all about, because this is about boundaries and this is about how you're using your energy and how you're experiencing this intuitive empathy. But I'm just kind of throwing it out there that, like, this is how my process works, so this is kind of where we're going with this. Okay. So, the homework I have today is fairly light. Um, go as far as you need to go with it, though, and it may take a couple days for you to really get out what you're beginning to perceive about yourself in this. So just, take your time and work with it. And don't be afraid to listen to the other videos as you go through this. This is really just more for your own pattern identification. So you're not going to get it all at once. It's going to come over time. And it may be the second or third time when you watch this boot camp, because this is something you should go back to periodically. You'll come out with deeper stuff, more specific to what's going on, kind of details. But I want you to journal. And I want you to journal about how some of what we talked about today might have colored your past experience from your childhood, your teenage years, even to some of your first relationships. Um, and as you're leaning into this, I want you to come at it from the perspective of how can you forgive that little innocent you from the past for being innocent? Because I really don't believe, especially if you're bothering to take this course, that you were coming at life trying to hurt people or make people feel bad or take somebody's life over or anything like that, or anything they may have accused you of as you were little, of not being strong enough, of not being able to cope, and maybe you're dumb because you can't, not cry at a test, whatever it was. How can you forgive that innocent you for not knowing? Because this is how we begin to heal some of this generational stuff. I mean, your parents didn't just come up with that line out of nowhere. They probably came up with that line because it's part of their experience as well. All right. Good luck.